Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Thomas's reading room number 2 and doing Through the Eyes, 2-year travel adventure story through America. That's Susan, that's me, and the car is Howard. And we'll get moving right along because this is quite lengthy, as you know, and we want to try to get some videos out to get further along. So we're going to start February 10th. It is Monday, and I wake, observe the roof of the tent, the snow lying on it, melting from the rays of the sun. Yes, the sun is shining, and there is a continuous roar from the stream rushing its way over various sized rocks. It seems as though there is little difference between the sound of the stream rushing and the wind working its way from the top of the mountain to the valley floor. Observing, listening without any thought whatsoever, there comes that beauty again, that indescribable beauty that cannot be touched, controlled by any thought of any kind. The moment thought enters the picture, that beauty vanishes. Thomas and I, Susan speaking, get out of the tent around noon, then stretch and absorb rays of the sun. The sun is out. Hooray, hooray. I get boxes of food from Howard, set them on the table, then unpack foods and utensils to prepare the first meal of the day. Thomas sets a large pan of water to heat in the hot coals of the fire pit, so I may clean the dishes after the meal. Steve walks into the camp and returns a deck of cards Thomas lent him. He informs us they are going hiking and invites us to stop by after they return. Thomas tells him that we have much work to do, though maybe we will stop by later if possible. Thomas searches for more firewood, then returns to the campsite. We sit and enjoy the meal, then I clean the dishes with water from the fire pit. We heat more water, wash ourselves, and Thomas shaves. Today is the first opportunity we've had to do this since last Thursday. I empty the boxes that are damp and sit them in the sunshine to dry. Once they are dry, I recognize and pack them. Later, I check the peas I have left soaking since yesterday for today's meal. Thomas works on Howard, conducting what he calls preventive maintenance. Later, I prepare dinner as we begin to eat. Dan walks up to us and says he is going to town to do some shopping. He asks us if there is anything we need, and he also offers to carry out what garbage we have. I think Dan is admirable to offer his services, and I thank him. Thomas and I decide to purchase a loaf of bread, so Thomas gives Dan the last $2 we have. I pour Dan a cup of hot tea and offer a helping of dinner, in which he accepts, although it seems to me that he is being more polite than hungry. After we converse, Dan says thanks, then leaves for town. We finish eating and I clean the dishes. It seems hard to remember exactly how often I have cleaned them today. Thomas maintains a fire, though the night arrives with the sun passing over the horizon, and it is too cold to be outside any longer. Thomas. Susan and I take material in hand and move to Howard. We spend a considerable time talking, taking notes, then we leave Howard for the evening and go to the tent where we conclude the day. I will die to the day and the yesterdays. Tomorrow being a new day, I will wake with a fresh, attentively aware brain. February 11th, Tuesday. Awake without any thought whatsoever, seeing without thought, totally outside the self. The eyes are fixed toward the roof of the tent. The rays of the sun cast shadows of the trees, branches, and leaves on the roof. That beauty presents itself in the absence of thought, then vanishes when thought appears. I look over at Susan, seeing that she is awake. I whisper, "Welcome to the new day." After we dress, we crawl out of the tent and greet the sun. I have been aware for some time of an image of a meter in the subconscious brain that I bring forth to the field of the mind. To describe, if I may, there is in the middle of the meter a 0, then 7 increments to the left of the 0 and 7 increments to the right. When there is a tremendous imbalance in the climatic atmosphere, and especially should there be no sun, the needle will move to the left as I become drained physically, psychologically. When the sun is out and there is balance, that needle will move to the right, sometimes off to the right of the meter's edge. At this time, I am stronger than I know. Once there was a time the sun's rays were blocked by clouds and the day was cool. I became drained, cold, experiencing chills, a weakness, though not like I was experiencing an illness. I observed the meter. It had read 5 increments to the left. Immediately I went to a restaurant as I thought of food for energy. I had been close to a waitress there, Shirley, and she took good care of me, bringing me food that she thought would help, and it certainly did. I saw that needle move to 0 and I felt much better. Clearly, I'm extremely sensitive to the laws of nature and seem to make life possible. Susan prepares toast and hot tea for breakfast. After breakfast, I build a fire and heat water to clean the dishes, then we wash and I shave. Later, I begin to scout for wood, though I stay close to the campsite, not to get too far away from Susan. We become closer now and seem to work well with each other. Bringing wood back to the campsite, I tell Susan that I'm going to see Dan and Steve and pick up the loaf of bread. When I arrive at the campsite, I observe Dan kneels, holds a frying pan with some eggs in it over a fire. Walking up, I say, "Hello, to the campsite." Dan lays the pan down and gets the loaf of bread. He comes back and hands it to me with some change and a dollar bill. I become surprised. The loaf of bread actually costs 64 cents and made of wheat, no preservatives, artificial flavors, or dough conditioners. Well, Susan and I are stealing the chips. We have a dollar bill and 36 cents left. I informed Dan and Steve what Susan and I are doing to generate income as we journey throughout the USA. I go on to tell them that I will ordain them both free, and figure their karmic number also. I find Dan is a number 2, and Steve is, strangely enough, a number 9. I ask them to stop by later, and I say I will give them the information to the numbers. I bid Dan and Steve farewell, and with a loaf of bread in hand, I head up the hill to Susan and Howard. I report the events to her, and she seems joyous. A short period later, Dan comes up to the campsite. I show him the information sheets, hand him the minister credentials as he informs me that Steve must pass on the minister part. I smile and say, "That is okay." I show Dan the A textbook and tell him that I will have to charge $3 for the book. He seems excited and hands me a 10. I cannot change the 10, so I tell him to visit us at the flea market Sunday and he can pay for it then. He seems happy with this as he says, "I want to go to the flea market anyway and this gives me a reason to go." I entertain the thought, should this be true, then it is unfortunate as someone should never have to have a reason to go somewhere. Dan goes on to say, "Steve and I will be leaving in the morning for Tucson. Steve has a check to pick up and I will be going on a new job." I don't have the new job or any job. Steve and I may be back tomorrow evening. Susan and I shake hands with Dan and I say, "We will see both of you at the flea market." This seems like an appropriate time to prepare dinner, Susan. Where did the time go? Already it is late afternoon. Sitting on the ground next to the fire, we enjoy pinto beans that have soaked overnight, mashed potatoes, bread, and hot tea. There never has been any leftover food after a meal. After dinner, I heat water so Susan can clean the dishes. Then we go to Howard to write notes for the volumes. I start the engine to warm us and charge the battery as we use a small light to write by. This is the second week of the journey and it certainly has been a tough one at that. In the first 2 weeks we have learned much and I become paranoid whenever we are in town. Life seems so beautiful when one is not imposed on every 10 or 15 minutes of the day. We finish writing for today, then retire to the tent. Tomorrow is another day. Willingly, I shall wait to a new day, having died to the yesterdays. February 12th, Wednesday. Susan and I wait to another day. The mind is empty, the brain is fresh, attentive to be aware, ready to absorb the day's experiences. The sun is about to make its debut from behind the mountains to the left of us. I turn toward Susan and observe that she is observing the south, and I greet her to a new day. The sun has now made its debut, showering the tent with its rays. The branches and leaves cast shadows on the roof. The air is crisp, fresh, and I seem intoxicated with the sweet smell of freedom. Getting out of the sleeping bags, dressing, we crawl out of the tent and make ready to meet the experiences of the new day. Susan prepares a breakfast of cracking good cereal, toast, and hot tea, which we both enjoy immensely. After breakfast, I heat water and Susan cleans the dishes. I scalp for fallen wood. Returning with some wood, I keep the fire going and heat more water. I pour cold water, then hot water into a 5-gallon container, and we both shower and I shave. What a great experience to shower this way. Everything seems so fresh and crisp. Later, Susan prepares dinner that consists of spaghetti and bread with garlic spread on it. We enjoy ourselves greatly and leave nothing for later. The sun begins its farewell, descending behind the mountain, and without any thought whatsoever, that beauty that knows no thought appears again. Later I observe some dead branches in a tree next to us, so I take a saw, climb the tree, and begin to remove a few limbs. The sky is dark, and we have an adequate fire going. Susan suggests that we treat ourselves to some popcorn. I think this is an excellent idea and prepare some. After we delight ourselves in popcorn and absorb heat from the fire, we move to Howard to talk and write. When I attempt to start the engine to warm the inside of Howard, the engine barely turns over, and worse, it will not start. I go outside, lift the hood, and with a flashlight check the various electrical connections. It seems everything is in order. The only thing I'm able to think of is a failing battery, or I have drained the battery through the use of the small light. We decide to push start Howard. Susan pushes from behind Howard, and I push with the driver's door open, steering Howard with the right hand. We move Howard approximately 15 feet onto a trail downhill. After a short rest, we begin to push Howard down the trail, moving as fast as we are able. I jump inside. This is a trick. Push the clutch in, slide the shift lever into third gear, let the clutch out, and presto! Howard comes through like the champ he is. He starts right away. I stop Howard by applying the handbrake, then I move the shift lever into neutral and hold the engine at a fast idle. Susan walks around the passenger side and gets in. After a few minutes catching the breath, I back Howard up and into the campsite where we sat previously. After idling for a short period, I shut the engine off, then attempt to start it again. The engine starts, although the battery is still weak. I keep the engine at a fast idle, and after we write, I turn the engine off. I restart the engine and observe that the battery is much stronger. I take a preventive direction. I get out, lift the hood, and with a wrench remove the cables on the battery. This way, when I attempt to start the engine tomorrow, I will be able to tell whether the battery is the source of the problem. Enough for today. Susan and I have Howard and retire to the tent. I will die to the day, the yesterdays, and willingly wait to a brand new day without any thought whatsoever. That's it for this video, folks. We will start the next with February 13th. Thank you for listening.